And great. So, for everyone who's here, thank you so much for joining us. This is Rice first webinar. And so a little bit of background of Rice First. Rice First, here we are committed, we're a committed team of first-gen students and professionals working to develop a comprehensive online platform that empowers first-gen low-income students and professionals. We oftentimes hear us use Figly, which is the term first-gen low-income students. RiceFirst.org is an online platform and community built for and by first-gen low-income students, with a goal to be a one-stop destination for all first-gen low-income students and professionals to turn to for information, advice, and support. We bring curated and first-gen low-income student-related career resources to students in the US. And we are currently 17 members on the team, and we are recruiting for the summer. So if you're interested, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And I think also one of the Rise First members, Lynn, is going to be sharing the link on the chat so you can access it really quickly. Also, for those joining us today, again, the webinar is recorded. And so there is going to be a recording available after the session is over. And so if you, but also if you don't feel comfortable with it being recorded, none of the attendees' faces are appearing. But if you do feel comfortable, feel free to leave at any time. A little bit about how this webinar is going to be structured. First, we're going to go into, Sun's college and career journey, and I'll introduce Sun shortly. Then Sun will give a presentation on optimizing your LinkedIn profile. If you joined us early, you kind of got a sense for what we were chatting about and the do's and don'ts about LinkedIn, and so we're going to dive deeper into that. And then the last 10 to 15 minutes will be a Q&A session. Before we actually start, and just to kind of get a sense of who's here with us today, we're going to run a quick little poll. And so this poll should take no longer than 1 to 2 minutes. And so it would give us a sense for who's here today. So let me go ahead and launch that. And so take just a couple minutes to answer the questions on there. And then after everyone is done submitting their answers, I'll portray that and I'll show it off and see who we have. Got a few more people to join in. Great, so it seems about most people are in. So an overwhelming percentage is graduate and professional students or women professionals. And people use LinkedIn very frequently. And most people heard about the webinar through Facebook. Those are really good points of info. And I know it would be good for Sun to get a sense of who's joining us in here today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sun. So Sun is currently an engagement manager on LinkedIn's Recruiting for Good team, in addition to his regular role as a senior lead campus recruiter. He is responsible for hiring and coaching entry-level talent for 100 and more business roles in San Francisco, Chicago, and Dublin. Prior to joining the talent acquisition team at LinkedIn, he worked in recruiting for Target headquarters, as well as college admissions at Notre Dame, Columbia, and Michigan. He was born and raised in Bellingham, Washington, to Vietnamese refugees. Sun is the first in his family to attend college and holds a business and bachelor's administration of management consulting from the University of Notre Dame, along with a master's of strategic communications from Columbia University. He is passionate about his Fighting Irish, Seattle sports, and coffee. In his spare time, he is learning how to golf and bartend. So our first question for Sun, and maybe so he can give a bit more background into himself, is tell us about yourself. What are your experiences as first gen low income student, during college and now as a professional post college?
Yeah, it's been an interesting path. Thanks for having me. I think I saw even a couple high schoolers are on today, so props to the two high schoolers that are on. Way to get in the game early. A couple things I've been thinking about. I know I kind of made a post about it the other day in terms of my background. I think the biggest thing for me is, what does it take to like make it? Like it took me a long time to be like, well, how am I going to help my parents out? How am I going to make them proud? And I've just been really lucky that I have been so lucky. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned to get where I am today is that like, I don't do what I do because it's easy, right? Like there are people out there that are like, oh, I did it on my own. Why can't anybody else? And so what I've recognized is my story is incredibly hard. Like it is for all of us. Like just the chances it took for us to find ourselves where we are today. I've traveled the world, and as bummer of it is to say, like there are some kids being born around the world today that just don't have the same opportunities that we do. So I've tried to put my life in perspective. I've been very like fortunate to what I've had in terms of my support system. But it's been interesting, growing up an hour and a half north of Seattle. I say Seattle, but it's really 10 minutes south of the Canadian border. So, I was closer to Canada. I was 10 minutes away, right? So it's super easy to get over there. But it's really affected me in a couple of ways. So I grew up in the northwest corner of Washington State, where honestly, it was very white farming rural community. And I think that has had as much impact on me as being a first generation low income background student. I didn't really realize that I was first gen or minority until I got to college, which is really interesting. And then when I got there, Notre Dame was actually way more diverse than any other place that I'd ever been, right? Like going to an 80% Catholic school, interestingly enough, like I had more exposure to diversity there. And I made my first LGBT friends at Notre Dame. Like I didn't have any LGBT friends growing up in that corner of Washington State, at least that were out at the time, So like I've seen so much being able to go to college, and then now we're working in tech and doing everything too. So yeah, I just look every day and just like, I'm actually really, really thankful for what I do. So that's kind of like why I'm trying to give back as much as I can.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think a lot of us first and income students also sometimes face those challenges, right? Of sometimes we grew up in communities that were similar to ours, and sometimes other times we grew up in communities where the people around us weren't similar to our experiences and our backgrounds. And so then we move on to college and we see a whole different community, right? Different people, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic statuses, and it can be something to adjust to. What was that, in more detail? What was that for you? That adjusting during into that space and at that time.
Yeah, I think the one thing is understanding the value that I add. And I'm sure some of us on this call are doing the same thing, but I was doing taxes for my parents at like age 11. Like they didn't speak English. They could barely figure out paperwork. And for us, like going out to a nice restaurant would be me going up at the Burger King, ordering a Whopper in English, because my parents, they can kind of figure it out. They were okay. But like, going from these life experiences to going to a place where, my friends and my roommates, their parents could foot the $50,000-$60,000 tuition bill at Notre Dame, right? It's just an immense world of difference. And so for me, it was just like, hey, not that I wanted to be a burden or a martyr by any chance, but like it was a two-way street. Like I kind of saw that like, hey, regardless of your background, there is still that drive. There is still that hustle to get better with what you do every day. And for me, I try to show them that like, hey, look, like regardless of background, like you're going to get exposed to different people in your life and diversity, right? So for me, diversity hasn't always just meant ethnicity or racial background. It's also been diversity of thought. It's also been socioeconomic status. It's also been like ways of thought, religious background, like all those things matter. And so I think as I've grown older and tried to like navigate the college and even tech space, is that I'm trying to find something that I could be good at and where I could add. That's probably the way that I viewed it through Notre Dame. I think the other thing was just, growing up the way I did, not that I didn't have any help, but there was like so much on my shoulders to get done. It took me a really long time to be able to ask for help. And if I didn't start asking for help at places like at Notre Dame and at Target and here at LinkedIn, I wouldn't be able to make it.
Yeah, you often hear times here just our cultures, right? The backgrounds that we come from. Sometimes there's a lot of pride, and it's hard to ask for help. And I know that's one of the things that even at Rice First we've touched on, and it comes across time and time again in our conversations. And that's always a piece of advice, right? To ask for help, to never be afraid that you find yourself in a situation that you can't handle, to reach out to others around you and to your community. Um, so I know during my time in college, I just graduated in May, but I struggled a lot with figuring out, what it was that I was supposed to do with my life. Reflecting on your own experiences, how did you navigate that during college and even now? And what advice and recommendations do you have, or do you want to share with attendees who are coming across similar issues?
Yeah. So I I think we mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned my love for Vegas a second ago, but um, I I play a lot of card games, and one of the things that I always talk about is just this idea of doubling down or going all in, and I mean that by emphasizing your strengths. I think especially as first generation students, there's a tendency to be like a perfectionist or to like really focus only on your weaknesses. And I think one of the things that has really helped me go throughout college and as a professional right now is like whatever my strengths were, I focused on those areas first, right? So like for me, my ability to build relationships, my ability to think big picture, my willingness to be a team player, right? So I emphasized those things in everything that I did, whether it was my student club activities or the way I played basketball with my intramural teammates, or the profession that I wanted to be in, right? Like I just doubled down on my strengths. Sure, there's areas that I can always work on, that perfectionism thing, my occasion to kind of procrastinate or, wait till the pressure really gets me to want to do stuff. Like there's things that I could work on, but if I worried too much about the negative aspects, I just don't think I spent enough time. And I think that's where we talk about the value each and every single one of us brings and that whole idea of like belonging. Because as all of us first gens and first time professionals enter the workforce or college, people are going to look at you and say, oh, well, you're here for one reason or the other. And don't worry about that. Like I would say, worry about what you bring and concentrate on that. I think that's been super, super helpful. I think a couple other things for me is I've always tended to care about the little things. I think those are really important, and kind of like to enjoy the moment. I think for us in our population, people look at like, what's next, what's next, what's next. Like, hey, if I get to this step, I'm already thinking about the next step. Take your time and enjoy the moment a little bit. I don't want to use the cliche about it's about the journey, but like that's where I've had the most fun is like in the build up to things, like the building of teams. I don't know if there's any gamers on board today, people that are playing NCAA football or Madden or NBA 2K, but like I enjoyed playing the actual games, but my favorite part was almost like the recruiting, the drafting, the building of teams, and then letting the team come into action. I think there's a lot of value. Like if you really slow down and get good at something and enjoy your path there, when you finally get there, you'll be able to enjoy it more. So don't put the blinders on too much. Don't think about like, oh, hey, I only want to stay in my lane. If you find something along the way, explore it, try it out for a little bit.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know I can speak from experience of oftentimes, our family places certain pressures on us, right? And this pressure leads us to choose careers or at least places in a setting where we want to choose a career because of a salary or a title. But this point about, focusing on what you're good at. And I think, that's one of the things with college is, and I think sometimes we don't get enough of that advice where that's what college is for, right? To figure out what you're good at and to identify the things that you truly enjoy so that you can focus on that when you move post after college. So that's really, really good advice. Thank you for that, Ted. So now thinking about, you went through college and now you're moving on into your post-grad life and the professional workspace. And now you're working on LinkedIn. So what are 2 to 3 key considerations that led you to where you are now?
So I think throughout the course of my life, one of the biggest themes that I've tried to live by is I try to find a place to go to school or to work where it's not just focused on learning how to do something, but learning how to be somebody, right? And I think that's kind of why I had such a great experience at Notre Dame, and then at Target, and then now here at LinkedIn. Um, just because you know with first generation parents or immigrant parents or refugee parents, they force you so much to like, hey, find a trade, like go do something professional or find this path. And I think for me, now that I've been in recruiting and in college admissions, there's so much value in being a first timer and coming from all our backgrounds that like our point of view can really be inclusive and help lift other people up. And so I found places that let you be you are extremely important. Now, with that said, being somebody is great, and finding a place that lets you be your authentic, true self is really the ideal. But there's still a sense of professional decorum. I'll just give a quick piece of advice here. I know there's a wide range of people on this call. If any of you are old enough to remember this movie Hitch with Will Smith as the date doctor, I've kind of taken some pride in being a life coach and date doctor myself with my friends in the past. But there's this hilarious scene where Will Smith is up on this porch with Kevin James. Will Smith is like this smooth guy being a date doctor to a client who's fallen in love with somebody and wants to know how to like date. And he's teaching him how to kiss. And these two guys are up on the porch, and Will Smith is leaning in, and Kevin James goes right in and kisses him. And Will Smith's best advice is, the whole point of this is you go 90, they go 10, right? So my whole idea about being you and finding a place that you could be somebody, as first generation professionals, like sometimes you don't get the best advice. You might take it too far and might even push the line of unprofessionalism. I would say, whatever you do, like be about 90% of yourself, like when it comes to job interviews or anything, just because there is that bit of polish that's very helpful when it comes to like a college interview or a job interview. So be you. We want to get to know you a lot, but about 90% of you is good. So that's one thing that I think is great. Some other things that I think are important besides like finding a place where you can really be somebody, I think for me is finding a place that you can continually evolve. One of the great things about LinkedIn is our openness about transformation and your next play. So when I started at LinkedIn, like my second meeting, my first meeting, they were like, hey, son, we know you're not going to be here forever. What do you want to do next? Now, granted, that's probably not super common at a lot of places. Like if you're going to work at an investment bank or consulting company, they might not automatically ask you like, hey, what's your next play? But I want people to think about that, right? Like be intentional with what you do, which is what I did, right? So when, I got to LinkedIn because they were looking for a campus recruiter that had worked in college admissions, and that worked perfectly for me. And I think every step that I've taken, I've always tried to make sure I have like step 2 or step 3 ready to go. I haven't been focused on it. I'm not trying to like only get there, but I think having a plan or backup plan and being prepared is always really, really important.
That's great. And so we spoke offline, and I remember you just walking me through your story of how you, moved. You chose to stay at Notre Dame after you finished your undergrad there. Can you share that story with our attendees? Because I think that is such a unique perspective just to draw on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's what do they always say? Like it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And granted, I am living the dream right now, and it's kind of due to a couple decisions that I made and was lucky enough to make. So coming from a first generation low income background, always a lot of parental pressure, and even pressure from your friends that are like, hey, you got to be a consultant, you got to be a lawyer, you got to be an engineer, you got to be a doctor. That's something that everyone's always like, hey, there's like this line, you got to go do it. And for me, I was actually a management consulting major at Notre Dame. I took classes on corporate strategy, change management, ops management. I was ready to go. Like in the spring of my senior year, I was down to BCG, Bain, McKinsey, and Accenture. I was going to go to the Chicago office. I was probably going to take a strategy consulting job in food and beverage. And like right before I was going to sign, there was an ad in the student newspaper at Notre Dame saying, hey, we need admissions counselors. Like if you want to stay for a year or two and work in college admissions, we have a couple spots open. I was thinking, sounds really interesting. Growing up as poor as I did, my parents made probably less than $20,000 US a year combined. And so Notre Dame took care of me. They paid my entire tuition, my room and board. And so I was like, you know what? This job will probably be here. Why don't I just ask if I can defer the job and become an admissions counselor? So I just threw caution to the wind and decided to stay and serve Notre Dame for a year. And it was amazing. So I got to travel around the country my first year, and just tell stories about Notre Dame and help people take that first step to get into college. And it just meant a lot to me to be able to do that. And then just when I thought, okay, after year one of being an admissions counselor, okay, let's go get that strategy consulting job at McKinsey now. My team came to me and said, hey, son, we know you're going to go to consulting. Any chance you want to stay in college admissions? I was like, well, what do you, well, I mean, it's been great, but what are you thinking? And they're like, hey, what if we give you a recruiting territory of Asia, Africa, Australia, the Middle East, Canada, and New Jersey? So all foreign countries, including New Jersey, right? So imagine being 24 years old, flying around the world for a top tier private school with all this cash money. So I'm flying first class, staying in 5-star hotels, shaking hands and kissing babies and telling stories about Notre Dame. It became a dream come true. And I did it for 6 years before making the journey back to grad school in corporate America. But it was an active decision from me to say, you know what? My parents have no idea what admissions counselor does. But you know, I wanted to pay it forward at that point in time and really do something that I knew I could do. Because like I loved telling stories. I loved helping people like get that first step to achieve their dream. And I've gotten really lucky that those same students that I recruited to Notre Dame as college students, some of them ended up working at Target headquarters. And that's how I got into corporate recruiting. Because after graduate school, I was going to stay in corporate branding or communications in New York. And some of them were saying, hey, the economy is turning around at Target. Would you want to potentially be a corporate recruiter? I was like, let's just go see. And taking that job then changed my career again to be able to get where I am today. So it's been super interesting ride. But just be ready. Just go when it's time.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, even as a graduating senior, that was a grind, right? It was go get that management consulting job and don't look back. Yeah. And I think your story just speaks volumes to taking a pause and taking a step back and looking at truly the opportunities in front of you.
Yeah.
So we're running close to the time and we want to leave enough time for your presentation. There are some questions about career and how to best prepare yourself. And so I'll leave those for Q&A at the end. But for now, you know, I think it's easy to say that you can't avoid the pandemic, right? And COVID-19 and what students, professionals, people across the world are facing because of it. You know, many students have already had their internships and full-time jobs rescinded. What advice do you have for students who have experienced this? How would you perceive this situation, and you know, how would you move forward from it?
Yeah, great question. I would say the first thing, and I've kind of gone back and forth on this, but I would actually say keep track. I mean, obviously, it's been a major deal for anybody, but I would actually probably add a bullet at some point on your resume or even on your LinkedIn profile, like if you had a position that was canceled because of COVID, because it was still an achievement to be able to land that role, right? It was still an achievement to get that offer, to still say yes, and to know that you had earned it. You know, maybe you didn't get the experience, but I think you still got a list that you got. That's one thing. So in this time, in that same frame, right? Like we go out and get internships and we get jobs to get the experience. And what does the experience get us? It gets us skills. And right now, there is still an opportunity to build your skill set, even if you were laid off or you had your job offer rescinded. And I think a lot of companies understand. So there's a lot of free resources right now. So, you know, don't feel like you need to go spend money on some crazy certification. You know, don't go drop a couple $1,000s right now if you don't want to or need to do that. But there are a lot of free coursework right now. Like we have a bunch of different LinkedIn learning paths that are free. Coursera's got things that are free. You know, a lot of universities out there have opened up some of their classes, like Yale's had, you know, happiness classes out there. Other places have opened coding stuff out there. So if you want to learn a bit about Python or SQL in the spare time, like go ahead and do it. Like this is an opportunity to get those skills and list it, because when we search for people in Recruiter, like we just look for skill sets, and that's important. The other thing that I would say is we're probably going to be remote for a while. And, you know, not to get too much of a stickler, but I don't just believe that like practice makes perfect. I believe that perfect practice makes perfect. So what's going to happen a lot in the next few months into the next year is there are going to be a lot of video interviews. So if there's an opportunity to like find your space, find your background, and practice your personal preference in presence in front of a video screen, practice that, right? Like look at your posture. Like, are you hunched over in your calls? Like, are you looking down? Like find a good angle for how you appear on camera. Just because I think that's going to come across a little bit. Granted, we're all very understanding of people. You know, there may be bandwidth issues. There may be like, you know, you're at home, you don't have an office, you don't have this crazy LinkedIn setup the way I do, right? With the lighting and you know the desk and everything too. But find a space where you're really comfortable, and if you need to, record yourself in front of a camera and just see how you speak, and have a couple answers ready. Like it's whether it's your life story or whether it's your strengths and weaknesses or whether it's a behavioral based interview question, get used to answering those questions on camera. Because you know, if you're answering a question, you're constantly like looking down at notes, like people can actually see that, right? Like you can see me if I'm like looking over, if I'm looking down. So practice that. That's probably the other 2 or 3 that I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel even as I'm looking at the camera, it's hard to kind of stabilize, right, and make sure
Yeah.
that it's it's at the right angle. But those are great tips, and I think you know one of those things that I've been hearing a lot as well is we're going to stay remote as for a long time. But even then, you know, I think companies are also realizing that sometimes people enjoy to be home as well and like to be remote and spend more time with their families. So I think that's going to be an interesting transition, and to see how that ends up unfolding, you know, as we move forward. So wonderful. That is, you know, sort of the main questions that I prepared for you. And I know you came with a gift of sharing this presentation with our attendees of how to really optimize your LinkedIn. So I will hand it off to you, and just for attendees, so that attendees are aware, Seth is going to be sharing his presentation, but he is also picking some of the attendees that suggested to have their profile showcased. So I will hand it off to you, Son. You can go ahead and share your screen whenever you're ready.
Great. Yeah. So I'll probably take 10 or 15 minutes and do this. It's a very light intro on how to do LinkedIn. You know, there's definitely some advanced lessons to do, but I'm approaching this as just a really basic how to get started, and I'll explain like why I'm giving this advice too. So, all right, let's get this screen shared here. Okay. Cool. All right. So, a couple things. Let's get this going. Okay. First thing I would do right away, once you start a LinkedIn profile, is if you've created this, go to the top right-hand corner, and there's like an area where you can click on a button and it says, you know, change your settings. And then once you get in there, it'll say edit your custom URL. I got super lucky. I actually don't even know how I got it, but my LinkedIn URL is just linkedin.com/in/sun, which is, again, a great opportunity to have some personal brand. I would say a couple reasons for customizing this. One, throw your LinkedIn profile on your resume. So it's going to be much easier if you have some sort of like naming convention or customization to this. That way, like when it's on a profile, it's not just going to say, you know, LinkedIn/in/ you know, K Johnson 8967324 AB, because you get this automatically generated URL. So go in there, customize it. It's a cute little thing. You know, but I think it's nice because, you know, it's easier to share out there. So that's one quick little thing. I can't honestly say if it's going to change your SEO or, you know, how much people are going to be able to engage with you, but I think it is a nice little thing to do. Okay. So once you change and customize your URL, what I would then advise you to do is add a photo. Our internal data says that profiles with photos get over 21% more profile views and more engagement. And that's important because like we're all on LinkedIn as human beings to connect with each other, right? There's content on here, there's jobs on here, but at the end of the day, like for me, what I find most important is like that one-on-one human connection where we try to help each other out. So a couple tips. Granted, you know, like I don't want to be the fun police. I'm not going to tell you like, you know, if there's someone else in your photo or if your photo is kind of fun, don't do it. But these are some general guidelines. Like really, it should be kind of a headshot. Try to have like a neutral-ish background. You know, try not to have like some silly logo T-shirt on, unless you're like a designer. You know, like I want it to be personally you, but I think it's important to like have that picture. There's tons of times where I've made a LinkedIn post and someone without a profile picture makes a comment, and the comments can be a little bit sketchy, or it could just be them speaking from the heart. I don't know, but like it does give me pause right away to respond to someone who doesn't have a profile picture, just because I don't know if they're a real person or if they're trying to be a troll or not. So yes, get a picture in there. It's really, really important. The other thing is, once you do put the picture, and again, if you're comfortable with it, I also think it's important to make your profile picture viewable to the public. The default setting is to only have it viewable to your connections, because we want to be protective of your data as a member. But if you're okay with it, I would always recommend you going in there and making your profile picture public, or at least open to like third degree connections. So that way when we look for people, we see there's a human there. So that's one simple thing. A lot of times, one of my quick pieces of advice is if someone comments on one of my posts that gets out there on LinkedIn that trends, and they're like, "Hey, can you help me?" And they don't have a picture. That's one of my first things I'll do to kind of test if they're actually going to be serious about getting LinkedIn help. Is I'll say, "Hey, throw a picture on there." Really quick ask, and if they do throw a picture on there, it's an easy way for me to believe that they're a real person and continue that relationship. And if they don't throw a picture on there, it might take me a little bit more time to actually get back with them. Okay, adding to that, changing your headline. Really easy opportunity to brand yourself. Right there you see Kristen. Kristen is one of my dear friends in recruiting here at LinkedIn. And hers is a very simple headline. Her headline is those words right underneath her name. For her, it says talent advisor, people person, and R for R at LinkedIn. R for R stands for recruiting for recruiting. So she's the person that recruits recruiters at a place that does recruiting. So her job's very, very meta, right? It's awesome. But I thought hers was nice and simple. I like it because it gives us a chance to see what she does. Talent advisor, who she is. She's a people person. She loves and gets energy from being around different types of people. And then her current job, recruiting at LinkedIn. Other people do it different ways. And you've got a couple hundred characters that you're allowed to use in your headline, but that's a really simple way to show us who you are. Some people will do it like aspirationally. Some people will say, maybe they're a product management expert. Some people may say data geek, right? But all you do right there is you basically just say a couple of quick hits or bullets about generally who you are as a person and what you want to be known for. While we are on the subject of headline, one thing that I see a lot that I go back and forth about is when people say seeking opportunities. I personally don't think the general seeking opportunities in your headline is a valuable thing. I would rather see you type in aspiring software engineer, or future strategy consultant, or aspiring marketer. I think that brings more value than just writing seeking opportunities in the headline section, especially because we have a trait now where you can actually click a box that says you are open to getting job offers from recruiters on LinkedIn. So that's my spiel about headline. Super quick. Don't overthink it. Don't go too long. I'd say 3 to 4 different things is probably enough in your headline. Building on that, a summary is important too. The summary is going to be right underneath, your headline is like your first section typically. And I think Jamie here did a pretty good job with their summary. It's your elevator pitch. A couple sentences is probably good enough. A paragraph is probably fine. Also, if you look under Jamie's name, she's also got a couple great examples of the headline, right? For her, she's brand manager, she's incoming customer experience intern, and she's currently a LinkedIn campus editor that helps us share LinkedIn information to college students. But her summary, I think, is actually pretty great. Keep it short. 100 words can be a bit short. So if you're a little bit more than that, maybe even like up to 200 is probably okay. But I like the way she did. Basically, introduce who you are, some of the things that you've done, what you eventually want to go into, and if there's an easy way to connect with you and what to connect with you about, share those there. Another little trick that I do is, let's say after those couple sentences and after that paragraph, I actually throw a couple bullet point lists of some of your skills, expertise, or things that you're really good at, because when we're looking for people on LinkedIn Recruiter, that whole box is searchable. So if you write in there, you're good at public speaking, or that you've done sales development, or that you have strong database management skills, or if you have financial analysis skills, that will pop up. So if you throw in a couple skills at the end of the summary section, I think it's actually pretty helpful. So that's a nice little hack or tip. Okay, for people who are just getting started, I would also say your education, it definitely does matter. Whether it's college or grad school, we've also taken great effort to add in thousands and thousands of high schools. So for people who even haven't gone to college, like your high school should be on here as well, in terms of listing your education for people that are looking at non-college degree required jobs. Whatever you do for your education, I would always add at least a couple things, like add some of the clubs you've done, add some leadership, even like maybe 4 or 5 of your favorite classes. That way, when we look at it, we see a little bit of depth to the classroom work that you've done. And also your education, the alumni angle really helps a lot. You can actually go in through LinkedIn and just look up other alumni of your school. And if they work at the same places, I think it's always a good first step, but always add some detail. I would say it doesn't have to be as thorough as your resume, but I would say probably, 2 or 3 bullets and a couple of classes would probably be good enough there. After that, I would say add your work experience. So you see the stat there, profiles with work experience are way more likely to get messaged, because, positions are great, but I want you all to know that when we are searching on LinkedIn as a recruiter in the tools that we have, we're not only looking for job titles, right? Like, let's say, you were a director of external affairs, or if you were a sales intern, or if you were a software development manager, we can look those things up. It's great. What's more important is like the actual experiences that you've had. So throw in some of the skills, or some of the projects you've worked on. And again, it doesn't have to be as detailed as your resume. Your resume is going to have, maybe 5 or 6 bullet points with a lot of different numbers and accomplishments that you've done. Like in your resume, you'll have accomplished X through Y by doing Z. I think on your LinkedIn profile, as long as you have a couple of bullet points about the skills and projects that you've done that relate to your job, that's going to help us find you. And I think I kind of explained already, but if it's not clear, what I'll say is, when I hire for sales interns, I will go through and keyword search for like business development, or sales case competitions, or cold calling, and that doesn't always get written in the description. But if that's some of the things you've done, it's always helpful to have that in there. So think about that. Okay, a couple final 2 quick tips. I think we all know with the economy the way it is, job applications, when they get out there, come fast and furious. And so it does help to get alerts. So if you go to the job screen, set your preferences. Like if you start looking up different jobs that you're interested in, the algorithm will build up other jobs that you eventually will look at. So search by that, but also like create job alerts, not just for the job titles, but also with companies and people that you're interested in, because it'll change your feed as you follow more companies and more people and more jobs to customize it towards you. And not to say that like, the early bird can get the worm, because some companies will post a job for, let's say, 1 week, and they'll get a couple thousand applications, and they may only be able to get through the first couple hundred. So anytime you have a job alert is really, really helpful. So that's a nice little secret. Besides always going out and manually doing it, I would say if you can create some job alerts and follow some companies and people, and they'll post it for you, that's always a good one. So those are like my super, super quick tips when it comes to LinkedIn profile stuff. I'm going to do a couple general reviews here in a second, but I'm just going to take a look and see if there's some Q&A out there that I can do here. Any other general questions that were about the profiles that I can answer real quickly?
Yeah, so one of the ones that caught our eye was how much of your first-gen experience you portray on your LinkedIn? Is that something that's that we should actively be working to add on to our LinkedIn? So that's one of them. The other, it's how would you go about showing your canceled or rescinded jobs and internships on your LinkedIn?
Yeah. So I would say in terms of the first generation and background in student clubs, companies that do it right are sophisticated enough now to know the organizations that those students are part of, right? So let's say you are a first generation student, you're gonna follow or be part of Rise First or the Posse Foundation, or Students Rising Above, or Management Leadership for Tomorrow. That's one easy screen, is to actually list through and talk about some of those skills that you have. The other thing too is, whether it's language skills or other little things, you can actually add some of these skills at the bottom part of your LinkedIn profile. So don't be afraid to actually add skills that are relevant to the job and to the background. And then with maybe the LinkedIn profile might not be the best place to put it. Let me think about that. But on a lot of resumes, people will put their education, their experience, and then at the end always have a couple of like awards or honors or different things you've done. That's probably worth at least a bullet point to say, passionate about first generation initiatives or first in my family to go to college. Like, that's searchable. I think a great place to put it would be in your summary to talk about your first generation background. And then in terms of rescinded job offers, for the resume, I probably do the same thing right now, is at the very bottom of your experience, or at the very top, at the very bottom of like an awards, honors, others, that's where you could put a bullet saying, hey, I had an internship at Deloitte in summer 2020 that got canceled due to COVID. And that would count there. On your LinkedIn profile, we're still kind of going through it and determining if the best way to do it is to actually list it under your job experience or to list it under like their other section. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to make a post on LinkedIn in the coming weeks after I gather some other professionals and other recruiters to figure out how to best share it. But that one, I don't want to steer you wrong just because I don't quite know where to put it yet. But I do think you should keep track of it, and we're going to put it somewhere. All right.
That's really good. And we also got an overwhelming amount of questions. I mean, there's 40 plus questions on that we're obviously not going to have the chance to go over. But maybe we can shoot over some of these questions over to you,
Mm-hmm.
and you can respond with the answers, and maybe we can find a place to post them either on Rice First or through LinkedIn, so students can take advantage of the resource. Those are a couple of the main questions that we have on the LinkedIn profile. The other ones we have are kind of just more related to the first-gen experience. I don't know if you want to cover that now or after you review the general.
Let's go back to that. I'll probably spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes on just some general basic profile reviews. So I know some people were really good sports and said that, hey, you could look at my profile. So if you're on, thanks for being a good teammate. I'm not going to like roast you too much or anything, okay? But I'll try to give you some good advice. All right, let me try to pull this up again. Okay. All right. Let me move this. All right. Let's go to, all right. Let's do this one first. And if you're on, I'd love to chat about how you say your name. Is it Anajeli or Anaheli? But either way, thanks for being a volunteer. First thing, by the way, if you're on and you know Brandon Hardy, and even Dan, but Brandon Hardy is one of my favorite people in the entire world. I actually hired him to be part of BLP this past year at LinkedIn. So he'll start with us, I think, in January. And he's a really great dude because he was always in the sidelines at Notre Dame games wearing this big gold suit as a student. So he was always on TV. So really, really great guy. Okay, a couple of things on the profile review here that I would say. The headline, super easy, quick change. So if you were an accounting student, just graduated, you could probably say like, accountant, some other things. Let's say maybe you're an advocate for some different things. You could be like accountant / advocate / something else about you would be a great little headline. I would say in the about section, that's probably where you could use some work. Just throw in 5 or 6 paragraphs, I would say about, maybe 1 or 2 lines about what you did at DePaul while you're there at school, and then maybe 2 or 3 things about your passions, and then, whatever you're going to be doing in accounting next. And then also throw in a thing or two about, your skills that you've done before. So in accounting, for now, it might be like, you also have skills in like macroeconomics and microeconomics and, and gap. All those things are little skills you have right now, but you may also have other things like if you've done public speaking or if you've done community organizing, like those are all those things you could also throw in your about profile. You did a great job of at least throwing one thing in your featured. Featured is a brand new thing. You could put different posts, different videos, different resume things. Really great thing. And then under experience, I would say if you're in the same boat, you did great talking about some of the things you've done in the past, but I would probably add some of the work you've done with your intern. So keep in mind any, non-disclosure or any privacy issues, but talk about a project that you might have worked on that summer, or talk about some of the things you helped with KPMG with the intern project. Maybe some general loose guidelines on the clients that you worked with. Like maybe you worked in technology space or food and beverage or CPG, just so that when someone finds you, they can figure out what exactly you were doing. So again, pretty decent job. I think I love the Chicago there. That's the river. I do miss me some Chicago deep dish, some Illuminati's and Gino's East down there. So it brings back some fond memories. But so anyways, you're on track. Cool job. Let's take a look here. Guan Yu, if you're on here, I think a couple things that I would change really quickly is just add a background photo. Headline, change the same thing. The big thing for you is you've got really, really great experience at Boeing. People are going to come after you being an engineer during this point in time. So the more engineering skills and background work you put on, the better it's going to be for you for someone to come and chase you down the line. The other piece I can say really quickly is if you look up here, customize your URL, super easy fix. You could just maybe eliminate those numbers at the end or combine your name in some way. Super quick fix. But again, you've got a great history. Doing research on drag forces, pretty cool work. So no doubt you're a successful, great engineer. So just throw more stuff in because you've worked at Boeing for a couple of years now. So as long as it's not super confidential, put in things that you've done. I think that's good there. We'll go to Celeste. Celeste, Nick. I admitted Nick to Notre Dame. Great Texas kid. If you see him on LinkedIn, make sure you tell him I said hi. Throw a background photo in there behind you. That's a stock one. Feel free to use it. That's your personality. I think the best thing for you to do right now is add to your about, because anytime you're working with students, I think the about section gives students a quick opportunity to get to know you. And you'd be doing yourself a service by helping them understand who you are before they clicked on you to ask for help. Same basic things as everybody else. Probably start adding some bullets to your experience. Because as you begin to finish, your fellowship program at Northwestern, that'll be helpful for you. All right, speed here. Luis, you're actually in really great shape. So way to go so far. You are a Yale finishing in what are you finishing here? 2022. If you next time you run into your director of admissions, Jeremiah Quinlan, please send him my best. He's one of my best friends in the college admissions space back in the old days. We used to do a lot of traveling and fairs together. Luis, the one thing that I would probably say for you, well, 2 things. I really like your headline. So keep up the work with the headline. It shows a good idea of who you are in a really quick sense. The one thing that I would probably cut down on a little bit is your about section. To me, it's a little bit long. Like I love your story, but I think your first paragraph is just about right. You could probably eliminate 1 or 2 things or 1 or 2 sentences in the about, and then take some of the storytelling that you have and bring that into the first paragraph. And then bring some of those skills and specialties up in here in those bullet points. But I don't want you to completely kill the about section, but I would say if you can trim it by about 1/3, it would make it a little bit more readable and a little bit more accessible. So, but yeah, looking good. So I know that felt kind of like speed dating, but I at least just wanted to, kind of throw that out there for everybody. Okay. Um, cool. We got about 5, 6, 7 minutes left. Let's do some AMA Q&A questions. What do we got out there?
Yeah, of course. And I actually know Luis personally. We interned together. And
Oh,
one of the things that so we're chatting on our Slack channel, of course, and we're just sharing how you're super popular. Like you're every
oh,
single person that you just showcased, you were connected in some degree to that person. So I mean, I think it's for a reason, right? And it's just wonderful how well connected you are. So one of the first questions that we wanted to ask is, LinkedIn is great for meeting people, right? And maybe this is one of the things that isn't taken advantage of enough. But how do you keep connected to people, right? How can you foster that relationship that you form with people as you connect with them, as you reach out to them? What is one thing, or maybe a couple of things that LinkedIn offers to continue to evolve that relationship?
yes. I think there's two things. The first thing is when you build a connection with somebody. I'm a big believer in adding a note to any invitation to connect. So let's just say like, hey, so for anyone who's here, if you connect with me, just be like, hey, I saw you on the Rise First Gen webinar. I'd love to stay in touch. Continue to learn from each other, teach each other some things, tell each other some stories. It'd be great. But once you build that first relationship, like you kind of know where people are coming from. On top of that, there are a number of different like LinkedIn groups and how to follow people and to continue commenting. I would say that like your LinkedIn doesn't only need to be like one-on-one messaging. Like if you do see people post that, like make some comments. I think it drives the conversation. And I think that I want to encourage people not to be scared to engage and not to be scared to tell your story. I probably get a few people each week that write to me saying, hey, I'm about ready to make my first post. Can you look at what I'm going to write? And I'm happy to do that. I would say like share more of your story is one of the best ways to engage, because a lot of people want to learn from all of you here. I think everyone's got a unique story, and everyone's got a really cool journey. And the more you share with people, the more people you can lift up. There's that old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I'm a big believer in that. So, if you see a little article, share it. If you see an article and you want to share it with someone you've connected to in the past that might help get you a job later, like send them the article. Or if they made a post, comment and be like, oh, that was really great. Like I learned this from you. But yeah, just like the little things matter. Like don't feel like you have to only do big things and share big things. If it's like a little thing, it's perfectly fine.
A question that's actually related to this. There was a student who shared that, growing up with Vietnamese parents, they would emphasize this idea of, respecting your elders or the people who are higher up. So the students share that they sometimes have trouble connecting with professors or recruiters or anyone with, super experienced backgrounds. And I myself also, I think this is something that we students feel a lot of the imposter syndrome in college, but also when we're trying to branch out. So how can people, who feel this way, how can they network and connect with others and still, remain professional?
So two things. One would be the overwhelming majority of people on the platform want to help. And, it's kind of on us to say, hey, I could use a little help. Like there are some people on the platform that are influencers that are there just to kind of hype themselves up or to make money. That's great. Hustle, do what you can. Like it's your world. Like do whatever you need to do, and you can't fault you for that. But most people want to help. So if you want to learn to connect with them, like one quick way would be to just follow somebody and kind of watch them and learn from them. But the other thing too is probably just kind of sweet talk them a little bit. Like if it's a professor or a fairly high profile recruiter, just comment on what you've seen them do and how you want to learn from them and how you want to get there. Like let's say, you find someone from your school that has a job you want to, it's okay to tell them that. Just say like, hey, we both went to the University of Connecticut together. We both went to University of Arkansas together. We both went to Florida Gulf Coast together. And you're now working in marketing at Microsoft. That would be my dream job. Like I've done a couple of these things. Can you help me a little bit or just give me a pointer or two? So just don't make a huge ask, but also tell them where you're coming from and how they can be of value to you. And if someday down the line, like if you can help them in any way, that's always good to point out too.
That's great advice. And so now we're coming up on the end of our first webinar. But are there any, last points, last words that you would want to share with the people on this call? I think it's amazing just how many people have turned out. We have, at one point, we had 200 participants. And so that just shows how strong the first and low-income community is, right? So any last points that you would like to touch on, or words that you would like to share with the people who are tuning in?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, like, right now, there's so much going on. I think the biggest piece is understand what you can control and what you can't control. And I think once you get to that point, it'll bring you some peace of mind. Um, not everybody could just sit back and chill right now. But I do believe there are some mental health benefits to not being so hard on yourself right now and not putting all the burden, especially on things that you can't fix right now. That's probably the biggest thing for me, is like, once I learned to let some things go that I can't fix right away, that I can't change today. That's been a big deal, because as a first generation low income student, I just thought, oh, I could just work really hard and get there, and just by my own force of will, I can make it happen. But it's not that easy. You just have to always be ready. You always have to just like try to do more whenever you can. But the key is whenever and wherever you can. So just know some things you just can't do today, some things you can't fix right now, and just take your time and just be ready when you can.
Awesome. That's really wonderful advice. I know I needed to hear that. So for everyone who tuned in and sent in a question, thank you for sending in the question, and we're gonna try and connect with Sun in the future so we can answer some of those questions and maybe send them out. But Sun, thank you so much. It's been an honor to just chat with you, both offline and now online on the webinar. You're an amazing person. Just hearing your story and your trajectory, and you're just someone who wants to help. And I think that comes across in everything that you do. So thank you so much for that. We're going to reach out and send out a small token of appreciation from Rice First.
Oh.
So we'll connect offline for that. But yeah, so for everyone else, again, if you're interested in one of the fellowships for Rice First, we've sent out the link on the chat, but we can also send it on our newsletter. Sign up on our newsletter. Follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. We're on all the social media outlets. So feel free to connect, and we hope that you enjoyed our first webinar, and look out for other ways and other webinars that we're going to have in the future. So thank you so much for everyone joining, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their week, and have a wonderful weekend. Happy Father's Day for any fathers that are joining us.
All right. See y'all later. Find me on LinkedIn if you need help. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.